Welcome to the Product Leaders Edge podcast. Welcome back to the Product Leaders Edge podcast. I'm your host, KJ Green. I'm a product leader, entrepreneur, and a lover of all things technology. And thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. We are continuing in our Builders series where we interview the world's best next founders. And today I have a very special friend who's joining us. And today's conversation will be about building wellness and care as infrastructure. Joi James is the founder of Finding Joy LLC, a holistic wellness platform designed to create psychologically and physically safe spaces for Black women and femmes navigating institutional environments. Joi is one of my longtime friends from business school. We met at the University of Michigan, Ross Business School. And it's crazy because I remember Finding Joy's launch back in 2023. So I've seen Finding Joy from the very beginning. But Joi, welcome to the show. Please introduce yourself, get comfortable, and please share your story with the audience.
Thank you so much, KJ, for having me. It truly has been a long time. I was thinking about it today. I was like, wow, it's really been 4 years, 4 whole years. Yeah, so thank you for sharing more about Finding Joy. Hi, everyone. My name is Joi James. I'm the founder of Finding Joy, as well as a stress recovery coach. And I've been a professional that has worked in the nonprofit and particularly the community engaged design space for over 8+ years, at the intersection of social impact, racial justice, philanthropy, and how we as society can interact with systems and create and design new systems of working. So I feel like this conversation is really a few years ago, maybe even last year, I wouldn't tell you in my wheelhouse, but I definitely in the last year have leaned into myself as a product leader, and with my experience in community engaged design. So I'm happy to be here, and really excited to jump in more about finding joy and product leadership.
Yes. Thanks so much for your intro, Joi. Love to just hear just your background and just the breadth of experiences that you have. It's great that you mentioned that you work in nonprofit, designing care spaces, but you've also were a corporate employee too. So you've
Yes, I
sat
have.
in the seat.
Yes, I
You
have.
have, yeah. So I think your perspective is so in tune because you understand the struggles from both sides
Yes.
and just a well-informed decision making in the work that you're doing. Just rolling into the origin story of Finding Joy, when you were thinking about building Finding Joy back in, ooh, seems like the early days
2021.
of business. Yeah,
Yeah.
2021. What gap did you see in the existing wellness or corporate support systems that wasn't fully being addressed? Like, how did it not meet the expectations for you?
Yeah. I feel like when Finding Joy was at its inception, I was much more focused on the corporate support system side of things. And I'll actually preface this with institutional support systems. In the years of evolving Finding Joy, I've moved from using corporate to institutional because I've seen across philanthropy, nonprofit, public sector, corporate spaces, you name it, that there is this need for additional intentional care for employees and how they're represented across the country. And so when I recognize these gaps in the corporate space and more the institutional space was during my time working in philanthropy. I recognized that I was working around a lot of other Black women and femmes, working in communities of Black people that were working extremely hard for their communities, societies, families to overcome systems that have been oppressing them or divesting in them over time. And those who are working in these systems are obviously pouring a lot of care, a lot of love, a lot of joy into their work. And unfortunately, institutions weren't designed to really understand how to support them. A lot of institutions were kind of lacking the cultural competency and understanding of how to understand their BIPOC employees at the time. And still now, where we weren't seeing as much like vendor diversity and corporate support networks that really understood the unique challenges faced by BIPOC folks. And think about this, this is during the time of heightened social awareness around issues that BIPOC people face, the Black Lives Matter movement, um, and a lot of those things in 2020, 2021, let alone the intersectionality, right, of things around Black people, Black women, Black femmes, and folks that, really incorporate a different identity along with being Black. And I'll really say that the solutions that were made or that, through our research that we identified, we're often acting in a silo. And this is really in the wellness space now, our research that we've identified over the past few years. They really weren't considerate of holistic care or really the breadth of the healing journey in the wellness space. And that was reflected in the features that they offered. So for example, a lot of things are offering one thing and not kind of the breadth of holistic wellness. Here's an example. An app may exist to have guided rituals to help you, and that's one facet of your wellness journey, but it's not really helping you understand what is the root cause of maybe some of the wellness challenges that you're dealing with. It's not certainly helping sometimes with the diversity and representation of how you may show up and the things that you were dealing
Oh,
with unique of being, not a BIPOC person that these apps are catering towards and other things. Whereas Finding Joy was really thinking about how do we do this holistically? And more importantly, how do we do this at scale? Because a lot of solutions are created individually, and it was really hard to think about how we create a large scale system that works with wellness.
wow, that's impactful. And I guess like when you think about what individual employees, are experiencing in institutions, what's not being named or owned, when these wellness platforms, wellness systems are created?
Yeah. I'll say institutionally, the biggest thing that is not outwardly being owned, I feel like, as much as it should be, is the role that institutions play in creating a safe environment amongst the lived experiences of their BIPOC employees. Um, we really need to understand that where we live, work, and spend our time investing in is the majority of our day. If you really think about it, if we're going to work to 14 hours or more, if you really think about some of the larger scale institutions and roles that exist in corporate spaces, a day, that 8 to 14 hours impacts our financial future. It impacts our nervous system, our level of stress that we're impacting, as well as, a lot of BIPOC people. We're seeing this is our future, right? We worked very hard to get to these spaces to now, be able to build a life that we want to live. And that should feel like we're doing it in a safe way. And when that safety is taken away, you're really breaking that barrier of trust between yourself and your employees, as well as yourself and your users. Something I heard as I was listening to you share more about product leadership in earlier episodes was around the difference between corporate validation and market trust. And something that really I learned in my experience in nonprofit community design is that you have to move at the speed of trust. The moment you
Sure.
step away from naming the problem exactly as it is, doing the work to ask the hard questions of what would be a true solution, and really taking apart and understanding the gaps and redesigning, you're not actually reshaping the whole system. You're trying to kind of provide band-aids, and people see right through that, especially these days. And so I would say that is the biggest thing that we're seeing as what people are not naming or owning is that safety is truly, if not their main role, within their top three roles. as a manager in an organization, as a CEO in an organization, and certainly the roles that are designed for that, HR and what have you. But it is everybody's role to design systems of care within these companies and organizations.
For sure, for sure. And that just brought up another question in my head because, you kind of mentioned just the dynamics of 2021, 2022, that time frame. But how are BIPOC employees thriving today in 2026? We've had so much change. So how does one thrive? What are the safety systems of today? What are we doing?
Yeah, I would say the safety systems of today are really honoring time and
Mhm.
understanding what wellness looks like for folks individually and as a group, right? Really understanding the science as well as the experiences, the lived experiences of BIPOC employees and how lack of safety can impact long-term health is really necessary. And so I think organizations are starting to understand that, and that's due to people speaking up over the time of, 2022, 2023, 2024. Saw a lot of folks leaving these spaces because they are looking for roles, or rather creating them now. A lot of folks are creating them now
Yeah.
that really honor who they are, their core values, and the lives that they want to live long term. And we're seeing a lot more Black women and femmes choosing that daily. There's a lot of work recently that is coming out. I recently shared that I don't love the language, but it's basically around how Black women and femmes are leaving this notion of we have to have the American dream job, right? We're working and stacking these degrees so we
Mm,
can climb these corporate ladders. And what really we are transitioning to now is choosing what we need in real time and creating a life around us and systems around us, wellness around us, experiences around us that reflect that. And we are taking the shame out of doing that. I feel like this idealist or what people had framed as idealist dream career came with a lot of societal pressure, came with additional stress. And ultimately, the goal of finding joy is to eradicate chronic stress amongst institutional systems because that eventually is going to build our economy. There's a lot of research now around the double tax, how the economic impact of Black women and femmes' lived experiences in institutions are actually impacting the economy as a whole. We think about the 30,000 plus Black women that have left the workforce over the last year. If we are not thinking that that is not impacting our nation's economy as a whole, we're missing the picture. And so, really answering this question, and Black women who are now taking hold and autonomy of what careers can look like right now in a safe way is really changing the landscape of institutions and how they're designing their care strategies, how they're designing their
mm.
onboarding strategies, their retention strategies, and so much more.
For sure, for sure. And I chuckled when you said that Black women are actively choosing, work outside and debunking the American dream as we have seen on Instagram. One of our near and dear friends did a whole
Yeah.
series
Oh my
about
goodness.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it was so true. It was so factual. And I really appreciated her for doing that.
absolutely.
I think
That was
too,
honestly, and so if
yeah,
I may, it's inspiring and it's also remodeling, right? The
for
more we
sure.
see folks creating these spaces, the more it becomes the institutional norm. So yes, I 100% agree. It was inspiring for me to see that and definitely a motivator.
For sure, for sure. And I guess, with that in mind, another question came to my head. When Black women, femmes decide to make this step out and this leap of faith to entrepreneurship, creating their own, work experiences, creating their own companies, how does Finding Joy make sure that care is still present as they are building something new? Because this is another level of stress. It could be, with
Yes.
creating something new?
Yes, that's a great question. And it is the core to finding joy, right? It's in the name. The core of what we support Black women and femmes in doing is finding that intrinsic joy in which you're pouring into everything else that you're building alongside of your work. And so that intrinsic joy is at the root of how we build our platforms. Truly, it's how we build our brands. And so identifying your core values, identifying the aspects of care you need to pour into, like Black women as they take this step, it's really about understanding intrinsic joy and how that intrinsic joy is pouring into your work. And to your point about, these journeys can still be stressful, they definitely can. I saw something today that said building a business is an act of self-trust. And Black women and femmes, self-trust is something that we are constantly questions about the decisions we make, why we make them, the
Yeah.
faces we make, everything, right? And so now you're stepping into this space where you need to trust yourself and the decisions that you made for yourself. And so care has to start at the top, right? You need to start with your core values and understanding why you made this decision. It was not made overnight. It was not
Right.
made amidst, a one-time decision. This was well thought out. This was intentional, and this was an act of self-safety and an act of self-exploration and expansion. And to take it as such. And so, particularly with me, with leadership coaching and working with Black women and femmes, it's always understanding first and foremost, where am I really shining in the aspects of wellness and taking care of myself? And also, where do I have ways to go amongst a whole list of dimensions: mental health, physical health, environmental, financial, spiritual, right? All of the things that we need to feel whole,
Yeah.
really making sure we question that first and foremost before we're building. You also said something that successful businesses these days build an audience and a brand first and then a product. And that really is centered in making sure that Black women and femmes, when they're taking these steps, are remembering that and are making sure they understand who they are and what their brand is first before they step out and build, because it's so easy for those outside factors to impact you. And so that is really how we're centering that. Like,
Okay. So you brought up some really, really great points, and how I interpret that is really just understanding your why, which makes you understand your intrinsic value with whatever you're putting out in the world. Yes, it may become stressful, but because this is your why, this is what you want to put out into the world, it just makes it easier, more
yeah,
fluent, more of you rather than like chasing the validation that's chased on the corporate ladder. That's how I
right.
interpret what you mentioned.
It becomes purposeful and fulfilling and
Yep.
intrinsically so, instead of, these careers, and some of us, really enjoy that space and time that we are cultivating our careers, but are ultimately to build shareholder value, right? And so building these experiences and products that, a lot of us have either experienced something with, or saw a need, or what have you, are building, there's something purpose driven with it. And recently I've been, dabbling with the understanding of good stress and bad stress,
Mm-hmm.
chronic stress and acute stress, and understanding, the periods of stress that you can go through in order to build a product that feels purposeful and driven, and the difference between performing for societal, corporate, institutional norms and the stress that can build, and what that can do to the body overall, right? Going back to the wellness aspect of things, it's really around how does that impact your body over time, and how these designs were not thought of with Black bodies in mind.
I agree. I agree. And the body keeps score. We forget that, but it
Yeah.
does. And it shows up
Oh,
later.
yeah.
And I think as in our generation, like we're rewriting a lot of those norms that our parents and
Absolutely.
grandparents went through by just being conscious of that, of our
Yes.
bodies. We continue to rewrite those norms and not relive what previous generations relived. But thinking through just designing finding joy as a platform, how
Yes.
did you think about designing safety as an experience, not just a value? Because I think a lot of times it often gets conflated into one, but yeah, I think an
Yeah.
experience really draws it out.
Yes. So I really see safety as a systemic right. Like I said, around the, institutions and their role in creating safe environments. And the
Mhm.
experience of safety really supports people in moving through their healing journey. And healing is really important when you think about, value creation in work, intentional feeling purpose driven in work, and being able to show up every day, quite literally. You need to be able to feel safe, safe going to work, safe coming home from work. All of those things, we think about that intentionally. If we take a step back and think about design intentionally, we're thinking about safety everywhere else. How do we make sure there are street lights so people feel safe to get to the train and get on the train and make sure we have the right proper signage so people know where they're going to get to work? But once we get into
Right.
the doors of an institution, we're not thinking about the experience of safety in those hours. And that is a really big miss to me. And so the services and products and experiences that we cultivate really reflect the lived experience of a Black woman's healing journey. There's a discovery period in which you
Mm,
discover the root of challenges, your core values, how you truly want to live your life. There's the accessibility piece of having the space, time, and lack of judgment to understand what brings you joy, to engage in movement practices and wellness rituals that really take what you're learning about yourself in that discovery period and codifying it in your body, and really feeling that new joy. And then there is the aspect of bringing it into community, right? To maintain that growth and accountability and long-term sustainability of yourself, your sense of safety, and what that looks like. And so when we think about safety as an experience, it really needs to reflect that holistic journey of a user, no matter who they are. But certainly when we're thinking about Black women and femmes, through research, we found that those three key aspects of discovery, accessibility, and time, as well as,
right.
community, are really key to a safe environment as an experience long term and how you choose to live your life and how that life impacts your future life, right? When we think about generational wellness as well.
For sure. For sure. And I guess, with thinking about your offerings with workshops, events, and coaching fitting together, how are you able to package that as a system rather than just like standalone offerings? Are you able to just
Yeah.
make it all one?
Yes. So, funny enough, each of our services and product offerings reflect each of those steps of the healing journey that Black women and femmes experience. So, that
Yep.
discovery period, when we think about coaching, the root of it is really understand what is driving you in your career, in your life, and how are you prioritizing that in what you're doing every day as you design your life and the solutions in your workplace. Our workshops, as well as a new platform that we're building online to bring Black women and femme-owned experts into your home, onto your computer, to
Whoa.
teach you their knowledge of holistic wellness, really gives that accessibility and time piece. How do you carve out either small moments or big moments of time to build into your practices, whether they be movement, holistic nutrition, breath work, understanding, and making it accessible, right? Making sure that it is culturally representative of those that are we're hoping to use it. And then the community piece as well, right? And so workshops in person and our events are the way that folks can meet new people that are hoping to build the similar types of things that we're bringing to the space. So we've had Pilates events. We've had breathwork online workshops that really spoke of Black dreaming and how we dream of different systems of safety and bringing them back to the spaces that we worked in. And that was then embodied by breath work. And we had a lot of folks that were like, I really didn't know how this was going to, but I'm actually really feeling this and really taking this into who I am moving forward. And so that is exactly what we're trying to do through the systems and services and products that we're building. And I'm really excited because this year that really came together.
It's good.
And more each day through my leadership coaching practice, through my Pilates instruction practice, and working with our different vendors, we're seeing this system working hand in hand more and more.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I feel like you were a participant of a lot of this too, like as a
Yeah.
student in Pilates, now instructor. So you
I
see
will
the
say,
connection.
yeah, I mean, it's funny because finding joy originally was going to be a secret Instagram of mine. You know, people make like Finstas.
Yeah,
I was gonna make like a Finsta of my healing journey. I really got to a point where I was like, oh my goodness, like I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I want to discover, what comes next for me. And it was just going to be a space for friends to help keep me accountable. And then I just continued to hear stories amongst other leaders and other Black women that resonated. And I was like, wow, there really is a solution for all of this. And so that's what really started our kind of journey into this could be a product, this can be a service. What can that look like holistically?
yeah. And you talked a lot about the healing journey. I would love to hear a little bit more about that and how each step specifically has folded into like the building of the platform.
Yes. So I'll say, like I said, I'm a little bit of the blueprint of finding joy and understanding of
Yeah,
the healing. And it really is a space of reflection after dealing with burnout, where I was like, whoa, I am moving in autopilot like many of us are, and I don't know exactly where I'm going or where I'm headed, I'm just doing. And I think we often get in this cycle of doing as Black women. There's a fallacy called the productivity paradox,
for
where
sure.
we think if we can continue doing and doing, we'll ultimately get the outcomes and understanding of our value, which isn't always the truth. And we see how that can also lead to the burnout. And so recognizing that that was, real for me, I then sought out the support of a wellness coach. And a therapist that was focused on somatic healing. So that was kind of my first toe into understanding, oh, there are people and facilitators who are designing these care spaces for folks to understand who they are and how they want to expand in their leadership that is true to their values. So that's how I really understood the discovery piece and how coaching is key to that. And many people, and there's a lot of research how there is an over influx of mentorship in Black people in professional spaces. And it's true, but it is also because there isn't the same ladder of being able to feel seen in the workspace and being pulled up immediately. Right? We are working in rooms together in communities to understand what gifts we have and bringing those into spaces. And so really understanding how leadership coaching and being in cohorts where we're seeing each other's work, seeing how each other's decision making and design processes are going to end up in other rooms if we do it together. So that also speaks to the community piece and how workshops really fold into that work. So making sure we're not just speaking into this work in a silent room by ourselves. You mentioned how you almost launched the podcast on your birthday, and then you decided to take a step back, have
Yeah,
additional conversations with other people, and you never know how that feedback and community can really support you in evolving what you
for
thought
sure.
you were thinking big on, and then the accessibility and movement piece. Pilates truly was something that I found by happenstance. I am as we've learned, a wellness lover. And so I had learned about the sacral chakra. I wanted to do work on that, and I'm not kidding. I looked into ChatGPT. I was like, I need to exercise. I need to work on my sacral chakra, apparently. And so, can you help me find, wellness movements that help me with that? And Pilates came up, and I remember hearing it from someone else about Pilates. I didn't know it was an Instagram craze or anything like that yet. I was just trying to find something for myself where I could move. And I was also going into a new job. So I was like, I need anything that I
For
can
sure.
a corporate job for the first time as well. And so I was like, I will take anything that will help me remember who I am during this period, because I had experienced burnout before. And so Pilates really was a space that helped me do that to slow down, but also to feel strong. I like to say soft and strong is how I feel with Pilates. I feel like I can be soft with myself, but I know that I am intrinsically strong. And that's
Yeah,
how the movement feel. So it's not just an exercise, it's not just like daily workout. It truly is something that I have incorporated into how I move as a leader. And I believe wellness practices and finding that for yourself can do that with anybody. And so that's why we've incorporated not just Pilates movement, but other holistic wellness practices in what we provide to folks as well.
that's awesome. That's awesome. And it's so great that you were the product. You were the product before you brought the product to the world.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you have to, like you said, you have to understand what your brand is first before you design that product. And it keeps evolving because myself as a leader is evolving
Yeah,
and who I connect with is evolving and our whole, the ecosystem in which we are working in is evolving as well. And so we need to
for
make sure we're
sure.
appropriate.
For sure, for sure. I guess thinking a little bit deeply about like institutions, performance, and structural like burnout, what breaks when care is treated as optional instead of foundational? And we see that a lot these days, fortunately.
Yeah, we do. Unfortunately, we do more so. I think in recent years. And what I'm gonna say to what breaks is ultimately trust. And when you break trust, it is really hard to rebuild it. And I think institutions, corporations, and even individuals lately, we are taking that for granted. When care is treated as an option, you're ultimately saying, you as an individual, I am choosing me first. Which there's something to prioritizing yourself, and that in itself can be care. But when it is outwardly causing harm, when it is outwardly being dismissed, that is where trust, which should be the foundation of all businesses, right? If we want to trust people with increasing shareholder value, I think we should trust them with our lives, honestly. And so when you aren't showing that care for other individuals, you can be doing a really big harm to other people, yourself, institutions, and ultimately how people see and perceive what you put out into the world. And so, what I see from a consumer aspect when care is treated as optional is people are choosing to also opt out. If you don't care about people, if you don't care about the issues that I care about, and if you don't care about me, and my long-term health, which is, and I think we don't understand it, a life or death situation for people.
Right.
I choose to opt out of your system and how you operate. And that can impact your bottom line. That can impact your retention. That can impact so much. And that can impact your economy, as I mentioned earlier, and the value of our dollar as a nation. And so when we aren't really thinking about that in the foundation of how we're building things, then we're really missing the mark. And as I said, moving at the speed of trust is really important. So when you break that, you're choosing to ignore a really big piece of businesses and how we communicate as a society.
Deep. That's so deep. Wow. Wow. And it just begs the question like how do we do better? How do institutions do better? How?
How do institutions do better? I think starting with the original question that you mentioned, owning it, right?
Yeah.
Looking at yourself, intentionally and asking ourselves, are we doing what we can to make everyone that we work with or that can be represented by the work that we do feel safe? If the answer is no, there's a gap to be identified, whether that's in the policies that you engage in, whether that's the experience that you offer day to day. There's questions that need to be answered. And first, it's what, right? What is the thing that's causing harm? And asking your employees, the people you work with, right? Conducting surveys to understand that, conducting that period of discovery, understanding the lived experiences of those that you're working with, and then working with people that are truly doing the work well, like Finding Joy, like other organizations,
Yep,
to build long-term systems that are culturally competent, that are safe, that are helping people understand the root of themselves and why they come to your work or choose your product, and then building for that. I come from a background of community engaged design that is really about co-creation with the people that we're designing for. And as a business, as a corporation, as an institution, you are ultimately designing for someone. That's right. That's the core product leadership. And if you're not thinking
for
about
sure.
their safety on a day to day, then you may be missing a core piece to how your product functions. And ultimately, a consumer may not be um, interested in what you have to do. And you may not actually be designing the actual solution you think you may be. So I think to do better, we need to be asking ourselves more, are we actually creating these safe systems? If we're not, what can create a better system? And then working with the people that you either have within your organization, like an ERG, or outside systems that can help you design those safer products and safer experiences for those you work with.
For sure, for sure. And I know we talked about institutions, but the question that rings in my head too is like where does the ownership fall on the individual? And what would you say to that individual? What framework, like what questions should they ask themselves to pull away
Yeah.
when it doesn't feel, when care isn't being prioritized?
Yes, there's a lot, right? And I want to say this also speaks to your earlier question around workshops, leadership coaching. The coaching aspect is really to take that intrinsic look, right? I am also playing a role. I'm also recognizing maybe an unsafe, environment, and I have the autonomy, understanding that, the confidence and autonomy to choose differently for myself. And
Hmm.
so I think what we're seeing is, the question I would have them ask is, what is the type of life that I want to live? What is the type of life I deserve to live? And then really using a strengths and wellness based assessment to dive deeper in that. And I have used that through my leadership coaching practice, giving folks frameworks that have, a simple statement with a liker, I am good at storytelling, or I can go to others when I need help, really assessing themselves on that scale. And then asking the hard questions. Is this due to my profession? Is this a boundary I need to set with an individual? You are at the end of the day in charge of how your safety is impacted through boundaries and through understanding yourself. And so that piece of the work
Sure.
is very important. And so I would say, what is the life that I want to live truly, and not what is the life that society is creating for me or telling me that I need to live?
I love that. I love that. Thank you for answering that. And what is it like to both be the builder and the container for this work?
It's special, I would say. It really is. I am learning so much about myself through this work, and ultimately building really exciting products because of it. This wellness-based app that we are so close to launching is truly something that I would not have expected 4 years ago when I started with this little idea to just create safer spaces for Black women that felt burnt out. But I didn't think it would turn into a full-fledged online platform that will connect people to these resources in real time and help them ask these questions for themselves. And so I wouldn't have realized that if I myself didn't go through that. I didn't see other friends, family, community members going through some of the things we've talked about and named it. And I'm truly the type of person, if I see something, I can't help but shout it from the rooftops.
Yeah.
And it's something I saw that I was like, oh my goodness, we as Black women are chronically stressed and overlooked, but at the end of the day, we're still choosing ourselves and creating the lives that we want to live that are so beautiful.
Hmm.
And I feel beautiful to be able to model that. It is a brave thing to do. It is not easy. It is breaking the mold of what we have been told. And I think, if you're someone out there that is not a container of the product that you were building, recognize that go out there and get the lived experience
For
or
sure.
get the expertise, the knowledge, the background as much as you can on what you're building and making sure that impacts your product. This week, my UX UI designer and I discovered the software that we've been looking for months because I went to recommend an online Pilates studio to someone else. We have been looking for this design solution for months, and I ran into it practicing Pilates on my own. I was like, oh my goodness, I've been looking for this software everywhere.
Wow.
Where has it been? I sent it to her and she was like, how did you find this? And then I showed her how I found it. She's like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we're looking for. And it is the
Wow.
final piece of our puzzle. So being the container brings a unique experience to building a product. And it
For
also
sure.
just makes sure that I am building with those that are going to be on the other side of this product at the end of the day, which is very important to us is finding joy and is when you're designing products for humans, which is almost anyone, you should be making sure you have that in mind.
For sure. For sure. And that's true product leadership. I mean, I love it. I love it.
Right?
And for a product like yours, I almost think you have to be a container because you don't want to cause harm in any way, any shape or form. So, wow,
Yes. And I will say, even for myself, as a Black woman that has experienced these things, I'm still doing my research from a scientific and an economic standpoint, right?
for sure.
I'm doing my research on understanding what chronic stress is and how it impacts the body. I am not a doctor. I am a Pilates instructor who is understanding anatomy more and more, but those things are things I still have to do my research on. And we're a B2B to C company. So understanding how the institutions we sell to are thinking and who needs this most is also a part of how we work. So you can be a container and also still have a lot of knowledge to build as a product leader.
Agreed. Totally agree. Okay, so we're getting to the final question
Oh
here,
my
and I
goodness.
want to ask Joy, how do you protect your own capacity while supporting others in your work?
Uh, it took a long time to get here, but it's the foundation of the work. And, you shared it at the top of the podcast episode that, 2023, we were launching Finding Joy at a live event. And I will say, for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, we didn't have as much success in that work because I was operating from a place of a lack of capacity.
Hmm.
And like I'm saying, with this kind of work and being a container, you need to be able to pour from that full cup. You need to be able to understand and be living your values in order to build this product, specifically the ones that we are working on. And so for me, when I found my wellness coach, when I found my therapist, when I began Pilates, started eating healthier, really figuring out what was the routine and the system that I needed, it became priority number one. It's how I design my day in order to be able to efficiently build these products and this work that I'm doing and ultimately a brand and like I said eradicating chronic stress long term. I'm hoping this saves lives and so this is really serious to me and so I feel like I need to seriously take care of myself. It's at the root of the work. I can't be over here not taking care of myself and telling everybody to take care of
For
themselves
sure.
and we hear all the time that people do it and of course, there are going to be hard days, tough days.
For
but
sure.
really being honest with myself about what those are, and keep going. Like I said, building a business is all about self-trust. So taking care of yourself and making sure you have the capacity, and the brain power and the ability to think and provide, honest thought to others. You need to be able to take care of yourself. So these days, to be really real, like if we could just get like really real, I love naps in between my two dogs. Like that really like fills me up in a day. I do Pilates every day. I'm now working with clients with Pilates and seeing them commit to themselves and to find this new system of movement and commitment in themselves has been really beautiful. And so that has really been filling my cup. Time, a lot of time with family, and loved ones has been a really big part of myself and how I operate these days. And then remembering who I am and where I've come from. So listening to dance hall music,
Yes.
connecting with my ancestors
Yep.
and really pouring that into what I do is how I make sure that I'm taking care of myself in this work and making sure that I keep going and doing that. No matter how hard the day, you have to remember that you decided what was safe for you. And you can make sure that you live that
I love that, Joy. I love
out.
that response. And I mean, we follow each other on social media. So I see your naps with the dogs, the midday naps, which I love to see because really, from seeing you take naps, we have nap pods at work. And I started doing that from seeing you. So thank
Shout
you.
out. More places feed nap pods. That is
Yeah.
amazing. That's actually really great to hear. And I'm really glad to hear it. It's rest is resistance, right? So being, if you need it, to be able to take that space, even just to quiet your mind, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we are going to move into our mini game segment. So this is institution or intervention. So I'll read a scenario. You will let me know if it's an institutional failure or a designable intervention. And this first one I'm going to read, I feel like a lot of people overhype this, but it's low key a
Yeah.
trap. Anyway, unlimited PTO exists, but taking it is stigmatized.
This is a hard one.
Yeah,
I feel like it is a designable intervention.
for
And
sure.
here's why. I think this is a community thing and it's ultimately a manager responsibility. There's a lot of research to show that managers are really responsible for safety these days and how employees feel and experience their day-to-day work.
No,
Limited does feel like a trap. Why? Because if you go to use more than you think, would be appropriate, which what is that number? Nobody knows. Then you feel like you may be penalized or looked at that you're not doing your job well or what have you. I feel like unlimited PTO gives a really big opportunity to manage your time as you would like to. A lot of our workplaces and how we operate as systems have the ability to time manage and project block in a way that can make sure that we're getting our roles and work done and also enjoy our lives, except we're missing the enjoy our lives part and overworking so we can
we're
prove that
working.
we're productive, prove that we are worthy of our jobs with these salaries, and prove. And so I think if we as a society will start modeling that you are valued in living your life, that we understand that living your life helps you do your job better. And as long as that is managed in a way that is respectful for both parties, then I think it's a designable intervention. Yeah.
Okay. I love that. I love that. We need to, yep, we need to get that redesigned. Okay. So wellness resources that are offered, but only outside working hours.
Yes. I will say institutional failure.
100%.
Yes. This is truly because we are showcasing that there's no time that you can take for yourself within work hours. And that is not something that we should be reinforcing, right? How many times are we seeing folks eat lunch at their desk and staying late and I haven't even eaten lunch yet, or can you just stay and do this one more thing and you've missed your yoga class for, I hear this a lot, especially, and I see it a lot as a Pilates instructor, folks, and a Pilates instructor in a corporate wellness setting, folks actually staying at their desk. We brought the wellness intervention to them, but they're staying at their desk and unable to leave and get that resource
So
for them. So you can
crazy.
even bring it to the workplace and provide it after work hours, and work will still seem like the most important thing. And so this is really when I say that safety is an institutional right. Corporations, institutions, wellness offerings, you need to think about how can we, have this as a 5-minute intervention, as a 15-minute intervention, offering nap pods, offering rooms where folks can engage in wellness offerings together, encouraging teams to do it, right? On their lunch breaks, encouraging people to do it together. And so I think it really is around institutions and how we communicate our value of caring for ourselves, and how that can impact your work.
Agreed. Agreed. Thanks for answering that one. And this final one is care is encouraged, but it's not modeled by leadership. What do we think
Mm,
about that?
it's an institutional thing. I think I
Yeah.
think it could be a desirable intervention. I think all things can be a desirable intervention. And maybe that is just me and my hopeful spirit. But I am not in love with the like, we're a family and we really care about each other. But
Save it.
then we're seeing those that are at the top, right? Yeah, just not modeling that. And honestly, the leaders that I've really appreciated the most were those that were real, were those that like showcase, like, this is what I love to do after work. Here's my daughter and she's graduating college, and I'm running a marathon this weekend, and, asking about how people in, your community are doing and things like that. And so as a leader, like we've been saying, you need to live your core values a little bit on your sleeve in order to build trust and so folks can trust themselves, right? I trust that if I take care of myself on this job or in this space, then I can still be successful rather than modeling that overworking and the productivity paradox and burnout is how you can be a successful leader. And what I'm really excited about is a lot of leaders these days are shifting in that direction, which is why it really is a great time for people to intentionally think about redesigning their systems of care and how they model that for those that work for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Okay. Well, that's a wrap, but there's one last question because you mentioned that you are building a platform.
Yeah.
So when should we and the audience expect this new platform?
Yes. So we are in the final stages. Like I said, we just had a eureka moment of the final software that we needed. And of course, there's always fundraising needs, but yes, we are building a Finding Joy web-based platform that
Wow.
connects folks to holistic wellness resources like guided rituals that are all developed by Black women and femmes and that are offered, as well as live events along with those. So that is going to be available for folks to test and use as early as April. We're really excited for that. So keep a lookout in the coming months. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn so you can be one of the first people to really engage with the content that we have. We're looking forward to having yoga practices on there, Pilates, breathwork, holistic nutrition, as well as ways that you can meet us in person with live events and engage with us virtually with workshops and leadership coaching. So we're really excited to have a full-fledged product. And like I said, these really began as services. They began as parts of my healing journey, and they've naturally developed into a web-based app and a product that we believe is evolving on some of the current market leaders like the Calm app or Headspace or things like that.
Nice. That is awesome. And what's your LinkedIn and Instagram handles just so that we call it out for the
Yeah.
audience?
Yeah, so you can find Finding Joy on Instagram at Find My Joy with an I, so that's JOI. And then you can find us on the LinkedIn at Finding Joy LLC. Should come up, Joy spelled the same way. I'm at Joi James on LinkedIn, and I'm really excited to be engaging with folks. If you're interested in wellness tech and looking to support us, we'd really love to connect with you. Also, in March and April, we'll be launching a Kickstarter. So, beginning our fundraising journey for our wellness based app. And so, we're really excited to be connecting with more folks as we branch into the tech space and not just the wellness product space.
Wellness tech. I love to hear it. And many positive wishes to you on this journey of fundraising and building this app. Super, super excited for you, Joy. And it's been really, honestly, just a gift to just see how you've grown Finding Joy over the past few years. So I'm glad that I'm able to witness it in the front row.
And but I think you've truly seen it from its inception, and it still feels new for me speaking about
Yeah.
these ways that we're expanding. So really excited. Thank you for the space to talk about it.
For sure, for sure. Well, that's a wrap, folks. Thank you again, Joy, for joining us today. And thank you for tuning in to the Product Leaders Edge podcast. This is a part of our Builder series. Please check us out on LinkedIn, Medium, Substack, and Instagram for more. Thank you all and hope you guys have a great evening. Thank you for listening to the Product Leaders Edge podcast. If this episode gave you a new way to think about product leadership, share it with someone else who's building in the tech space today. You can follow my work on LinkedIn through my weekly series, Tech Tuesdays with KJ, and subscribe to the newsletter on Substack, which is Solostar by KJG.substack.com. And I'll link all of that into the show notes for you all. But let's continue to build at the intersection of product, cloud, and AI. Until next time, keep building.